Good morning, everyone. And I think as we've gone a few minutes past the hour, we should start. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. It's quite warm. We've put the aircon on, so hopefully that will help. I can see a lady busy fanning already. And just to point out to you, because it's slightly hidden by the public, in the top right-hand corner there is cold water and iced water options. So if anyone feels, rather than having too many people going in and out to the cafe. And I'd just like to say a few words about the meeting today. It's our first meeting together as a committee, my first in the chair. I was vice chair last year, and I'd like to welcome all our new members. Just to say, please remain seated when you're called to speak, and I imagine you're all used to these microphones by now, but when you've spoken, can you turn your microphone off? And to note that this meeting is being webcast live, and if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and then you'll be called to speak. Voting will be conducted by the raising of hands unless a named vote has been requested. We've done the, oh yes, to switch your mobile telephone off. There's nothing worse, especially for the webcasting, when someone's phone goes and then they look guilty and there's a mad scramble to turn it off, or set it to silent. If the fire alarm goes off during the course of the meeting, it's not a test, and I would ask that you make your way to the assembly point through the emergency fire exit point. Do we know roughly which way that is? So that we're not all fighting. Through the doors. Perfect. Good. I'd like to introduce the following officers who are present at the meeting today. Not necessarily sitting in the order I'll say them, but we have Emily Barker, who's the Head of Planning and Transport Planning, Steve Aldridge, Development Management Team Manager, Joe O'Brien, Senior Planning Officer, Martin Juji is the Principal Planner, Beatrice Dady is for our lawyer, Simon Lewis, Democratic Services Officer, Cody Levine, County Ecologist, and Nigel Gorski, Development Control Team Leader for Highways. Thank you. Dee, we'll move on to agenda item number 1. Could we have confirmation of any apologies and notification of any named substitutes, please, Beatrice?
Thank you, Chairman. We have 3 apologies. Councillor Audrey, Councillor Basto, and Councillor Jean Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, Malcolm.
Good morning. Apologies.
You've got the walk of shame. Did you have trouble parking? Yeah, we had heard it was a little tricky out there. Malcolm. Just on the right, Malcolm. That way. There. Yep.
Sorry.
No, you're welcome. Right, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, and that's the declaration of interests. And I'll call for details, together with details of items to which they relate. Remember, you only need to declare an interest when it relates to an item on today's agenda and falls within the categories summarised on the inside cover of the agenda. I know you've all read that. Right. Okay. No declarations of interest? Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. It is an interest, but it's not a declaration. With the mandatory training that we have to undergo for this committee, and unfortunately we haven't got a full complement today. Have all the members completed the mandatory training, do we know? And it's unfortunate if members are unable to attend because of full-time jobs. Would it not be prudent to look for councillors that can actually attend the meetings? Because it's important, this planning meeting, that we do have a full complement, Chairman. It's an observation. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, I think there's only one councillor who hasn't been trained and he's not here today.
Point of order, please, Chair. Sorry, good morning. Can we just check, because it's so important that members are aware of the local mineral plan, and can we find out whether or not they've read it? because it's very pertinent to this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. It is pertinent. It is quite a long document, an important document, so you're quite right to point it out, I think. Beatrice, did you wish to comment on that, or is that all right?
I think it's
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to move on to public participation, and we have speakers today, and they will be called to speak at agenda item 5. Just to put things straight for the past, could I sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting which were held way back in March 2024 when we did the secondary school at Wild Forest, as you all remember? Right, so moving on to today's item. The proposed extraction of sand and gravel with restoration to agriculture and nature conservation, including ponds, wetlands, hedgerows, and lowland mixed deciduous woodland and meadows on land at Ripple East, Bow Lane, Ripple, Worcestershire. And if I can ask Joe O'Brien, who's with us, to take us through the report and the associated plans and photographs, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Members visited both the application site and the Ryle House Farm processing facility yesterday. Travelling to the application site via the route vehicles would take to both deliver and remove plant and machinery to the site. Slide 1. The application proposes the extraction of sand and gravel over a phased 3-year period at a site known as Ripple East, located on Bow Lane in Ripple. The restoration plan includes returning the land to a mix of agricultural use and nature conservation features such as ponds, wetlands, hedgerows, meadows and lowland mixed deciduous woodland. Restoration would be achieved using in situ overburden and soils. The total site area currently in agricultural use comprises of about 22.8 hectares. Of this, around 11.3 hectares are proposed for mineral extraction. The extraction area includes about 5.44 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land, classified as Grade 3A, and 5.86 hectares of land classified as Grade 3B. Situated in the open countryside of South Worcestershire, within the Malvern Hills district, the application site lies close to the administrative boundary with Gloucestershire. An elevated section of the M50 motorway, Queen Hill Motorway Bridge, defines the southern boundary of the site. To the west, a narrow woodland strip forms the boundary, beyond which lies the former Ripple Quarry, which has since been restored primarily to a large water body. Further west is the River Severn. The eastern boundary of the site is formed by Bow Lane. The site is enclosed by hedgerows on all sides. Internally, a strip of hedgerow divides the northern part of the site into 2 parcels. Additionally, an existing track, previously used as a haul road for Ripple Quarry, bisects the site and connects to Bow Lane, providing access. Slide 2. The nearest local wildlife site is Ripple Lake and the Naps, which is located west of the application site, immediately adjacent to Phase 3 of the proposed extraction area in the south of the application site. The River Severn local wildlife site and the restored Ripple Quarry, which is important for wetland birds, are located immediately adjacent to the red line boundary. The nearest heritage asset is the Grade 2 listed station house, located about 25 metres from the site boundary and about 100 metres from the extraction area. Uckinghall Conservation Area lies about 75 metres to the north and Ripple Conservation Area about 240 metres to the east. Slide 3 shows or gives an overview of the site's context and its proximity to the sand and gravel processing facility at Ryle House Farm Quarry, which members visited yesterday. Ripple East Quarry would be a satellite extension to Ryle House Farm Quarry and expects to provide a continuation of supply once the reserves at Ryle North Quarry are depleted. Sand and gravel would be transported via barge along the River Severn to Ryle House Farm for processing. Processed material would then be ready for onward delivery to market and or sale via the primary road network. The applicant states that the proposed barging system, timelines and volumes would be similar to those at Ryle North Quarry, which equates to approximately 24 barge movements per day. Deliveries would be based on a 5-day working week. Slide 4 shows the nearest residential property to the site is Silvermead, which is located adjacent to the entrance fronting Bow Lane, approximately 40 metres from the proposed extraction area. The residential property Lakeview is located on Bow Lane, opposite the entrance to the site. Station House is located approximately 100 metres west of the proposed extraction area on the opposite side of Bow Lane. The village of Uckinghall is located to the north of the application site, where the nearest residential property is Guildridge, located approximately 100 metres from the proposed extraction area. The other nearest residential properties are set out in the report at paragraphs 50 to 53. Slide 5. CEMEX is applying for planning permission to extract approximately 475,000 tonnes of sand and gravel at Ripple East, Bow Lane, over 3 years. Extraction would occur in 3 phases, moving generally east to south, extracting about 300,000 tonnes per year. The extraction depth would range from about 1 to 5.5 metres, with an average of 3.5 metres. Progressive restoration would use on-site overburden and soils to create a mixed-use aftercare scheme featuring agricultural land and nature conservation areas such as ponds, wetlands, hedgerows, meadows and lowland mixed deciduous woodland. No fixed plant or facilities would be installed. Extraction would be conducted under dry working conditions. Water with suspended solids would be settled within the quarry void before being pumped to infiltration areas or discharged to the River Severn or other approved outfalls, with all the necessary permits obtained. Slide 6. This slide shows phase 1, where soil and overburden would be stripped in a southerly direction using an excavator and dozer. Material would then be used to form screening bunds about 3 to 5 metres high along the eastern boundary, including near the residential property Silvermead. Slide 7 shows phase 2, where soil and overburden would be stripped in an easterly direction and used to create a screening bund along the eastern edge of phase 3 and used to fill the phase 1 void. Phases 1 and 2 would have a setup and working duration of about 8 months. Slide 8 shows phase 3, where soil and overburden would be stripped in a southerly direction, with overburden soil moved in a northerly direction and used as part of the progressive restoration of the site. Phase 3 would have a setup and working duration of about 1 year to 17 months. Extraction would occur on a campaign basis, approximately 2 to 4 campaigns per year, with progress subject to weather conditions. Slide 9. The submitted transport statement, and as shown on the slide, outlines the route for transporting operational equipment and vehicle movements linked to campaigns at Ripple East Quarry. Machinery would mostly be brought in and out on low loaders at the start and end of campaigns, with regular fuel deliveries by a rigid tanker. In a worst-case scenario of 4 campaigns per year, there would be about 16 low-loader and 3 escorted dump truck movements per campaign. alongside about 10 daily light vehicle trips for staff. Extraction would occur in up to 4 campaigns annually, each lasting 4 to 7 weeks, except for the first, which may last 8 to 12 weeks to allow for setup. Local residents would be notified of the proposed intended delivery and collection of plant and machinery by low loaders or large vehicles. Slide 10. The site would be progressively restored as mineral extraction advances through the application site, using in situ derived overburden and soils to land uses, including, as previously set out, high quality agricultural land, wet margins, woodland, open water, ponds, reed beds, lowland mixed deciduous woodland, lowland meadows, hedgerows, reed beds, and aquatic margins. The applicant proposes to retain the existing in situ wharf as part of the restoration of the site. Mineral extraction and restoration of the site would be completed between about 2.5 to 3 years. A detailed breakdown of the restoration scheme is set out at paragraph 28 of your reports. Turning to your reports, the summary of issues is set out at paragraph 58 and includes Worcestershire's land bank of sand and gravel reserves, location of the development, residential amenity, water, environment and flooding, and cumulative effects. Planning policy is then set out from pages 9 to 13. For any members who are unable to attend the site visit yesterday, these slides just show a few photographs of the site. Turning to consultations and at paragraph 97 of the report, District Councillor Owenson objects to the proposal on the grounds of adverse impact to Uckinghall and Ripple conservation areas, loss of tourism revenue and potential contamination of prime and loss of Grade 1 agricultural land. Ripple Parish Council recommend refusal of the planning application on the grounds of adverse impact on the local highway network, residential amenity, cumulative impact, impact on heritage assets and the loss of agricultural land. Twining Town Council, which is neighbouring, state that they object to the proposal on the grounds of adverse impact on amenity, health impacts and cumulative impact. Malvern Hills District Council have no objection and support the proposal in principle, recognising the economic benefits associated with mineral extraction. They state that the application site falls within a mineral safeguarding area for sand and gravel, and that the planning history of the site shows previous extraction activity. The Environment Agency have no objections, subject to conditions relating to ground and surface water monitoring, a flood storage compensation scheme, pollution prevention measures, protection of ground and surface water and storage of oils, fuels and other potentially polluting liquid. The County Landscape Officer has no objection, subject to conditions protecting retained landscape features. Natural England have no objection and state that with regard to soils and land quality that the proposal would not appear to lead to the long-term loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. The County Highways Officer has no objection, subject to a condition relating to a SEMP for highways, which is a construction and environmental management plan. Turning to other representations at paragraph 352 of the report, to date 38 letters of representation, some of which are from the same respondents and include comments from the Ripple Extraction Action Community Team, Action Group and the Battlefields Trust, all of which are objections to the proposal. Representations object on the grounds of dust, air quality, vibration, health, noise, impacts on tourism, traffic and highway safety and prematurity. Turning to the officer's comments, and Worcestershire's land bank of sand and gravel reserves at paragraph 357. This demonstrates that on the 31st of December 2023, Worcestershire had a land bank of about 7.53 years, which is just above the minimum land bank of 7 years required by national policy. Paragraph 360 confirms that, taking into account recent permissions, that the land bank on the 31st of December 2024 is estimated to be about 7.79 years. And should this planning permission be granted, it would increase the land bank by about 0.7 years. Officers conclude that the proposal would contribute to a steady and adequate supply of mineral and adding to resilience to the mineral supply in the county, which is currently provided by a limited number of active sites. Turning to the location of development at paragraph 379, it is considered that the location of the development accords with the strategic locational policies of the adopted Worcestershire Minerals Local Plan. Turning to residential amenity, the application was accompanied by a noise assessment and dust and air quality assessments. The noise assessment is based on a conservative worst-case scenario with no screening in place and concludes that the predicted noise levels from both the temporary and routine operations at the site would remain well within the noise limits set out in the planning practice guidance, which is the most up-to-date government guidance relating to noise emissions from mineral extraction. With regard to concerns relating to the potential of noise reflection from the proposed lakes, which would potentially increase noise from the M50 motorway, WRS recommended that the applicant's acoustic consultant provide an assessment. In response, the applicant submitted a technical note which concluded that the proposed water bodies would result in a noise increase of approximately 1 dB, which is considered imperceptible to nearby residents. WRS agreed but noted that the existing Ripple Quarry Lake may contribute to a slightly greater cumulative impact, potentially perceptible outdoors under certain conditions, i.e. a northerly wind. However, they concluded it would not be significant or lead to adverse effects. With regard to dust and air quality impacts, WRS state that they are satisfied that the submitted dust management plan appears comprehensive and robust, and that its implementation should ensure that any associated dust emissions are prevented and or minimised, and as such require that should planning permission be granted, that the dust and management plan is conditioned. Officers consider that, subject to the imposition of conditions relating to operating hours, limiting the duration of the development, restricting lighting, the extent of mineral extraction, the phasing scheme, construction of soil screening bund, carrying out of the development in accordance with the dust management plan, that all vehicles and plants being maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's specification, upward-facing exhausts on plant and machinery, white noise reversing alarms on mobile plant and machinery, and a community liaison group, that there would be no unacceptable adverse air pollution, noise, dust, vibration, or lighting impacts on residential amenity or that of human health. Turning to the water environment and flood risk, set out at paragraph 329, states that the applicant has demonstrated that the proposed restored lake would increase floodplain storage capacity. The Environment Agency have raised no objections, stating that they are satisfied that the proposal would not significantly reduce floodplain capacity or increase flood risk. Noting the past mineral stockpile area caused no known issues. They consider that the proposed scheme would offer overall betterment, improving flood risk management from the outset of the development. Turning to cumulative impacts, which start at page 123, concerns regarding the cumulative impacts, including noise, dust, air quality and health effects from the simultaneous operation of Bow Farm and Ripley's quarries have been addressed in the applicant's environmental statement addendum, which demonstrates that no significant adverse impact would arise from the simultaneous working of Bow Farm Quarry and Ripley's Quarry due to the location of the M50 motorway, which bisects the two sites and as such provides a separation buffer and attenuation barrier between the two sites, which in combination with the proposed mitigation measures in respect of noise, dust and visual impact negate any significant adverse impacts. The relevant technical consultees have confirmed that they have no objections, concluding that there would be no predicted cumulative effects. In relation to all other matters set out in the report, including best and most versatile agricultural land, alternatives, traffic, highway safety and impacts upon public rights of way, landscape character and visual impact, historic environment, ecology, biodiversity and geodiversity, restoration and aftercare, economic impact, climate change and sustainability and prematurity, officers consider the impacts of the proposal to be acceptable, subject to appropriate conditions where relevant. Turning to the recommendation at paragraph 836, it is recommended that having taken the environmental information into account, planning permission be granted, subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure an extended aftercare and management period of 5 years, totalling 10 years, and subject to the conditions to be set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jo, for your detailed presentation and also for the comprehensive site visit we had yesterday, which was especially useful for members new to planning who were able to attend. I'll now ask members if they have any questions of Jo or any other officers on the report and presentation, but please note, do refrain from entering into debate at this stage. It does not preclude members from raising any further questions to officers during the general debate, but please indicate if you wish to ask a question. Councillor Cleary?
Thanks, Chair. It was just a question about something I read on page 2. We heard in the report that the plan is to extract 300,000 tonnes, but on page 2, maybe I'm misreading this, it states an extraction of 475,000 tonnes a year and 300,000 tonnes a year in the same paragraph. And if I've misconstrued that, I apologise, but could you clarify?
Sorry, it should say total. Yeah, a total, yeah, over the life of the quarry.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, good morning again, Chair, thank you. Can we go back to slide 2, please, having regard to these photos for the councillors, but can we look at slide 2? Thank you. There we go, okay. That's it, slide 2. So that slide 2 shows where Silvermead is, which is the little bit, I don't know if members can see, just to the left of the words where it says the site. I'm disappointed, really, that you haven't included a photograph to show just how close Silvermead is to the extraction. You're showing nice, wide, open fields and no houses around. Well, there is one, and I'm wondering why you didn't do that.
I think the report specifies how close Station House is to the extraction area.
Yes,
I'd just add to that, the photos, obviously members were invited to a site visit yesterday, so saw the site, it was pointed out the proximity and members stood by the site. The photos here obviously kept to a minimum because the presentation is quite long. So it's trying to keep that just to show the key aspects of the site.
Yes, thank you. I would say it is a key aspect of the site, and I'm disappointed that it's hidden from view today to the members of the public and the councillors who couldn't attend. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Riaz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I've got 2 or 3 questions. Just in terms of minerals planning the Minerals Planning Authority has the Minerals Planning Authority undertaken a full Regulation 25 assessment under the EIA regulations? And can you explain how the cumulative effects have been integrated into the environmental decision-making framework? That's the first question. Yeah.
Thank you. So the planning application, because it's EIA development, has undergone, I think it's 3 rounds of Regulation 25 requests. Each time the applicant has submitted the further information, which has then obviously gone out for consultation, public consultation and consultation with the relevant consultees. If ever any further information has been requested, it then has moved on to a further Regulation 25, again to be assessed.
Shall I just add about cumulative effects, like your second part of that question? So cumulative effects is a requirement of the environmental impact assessment regulations. So that has to be assessed for it to be an adequate environmental impact assessment. And you'll see there on page 123, on to 125, the assessment of cumulative effects. And that concludes there that it's acceptable. There'll be no significant adverse impacts, either individually or cumulatively with other developments.
Thank you. I've got a follow-on question, Chair, please. Under SWDP 22 and 31, how will the development protect local biodiversity and minimise land instability?
So the development has been assessed by the county ecologist, Worcestershire Wildlife Trust, Natural England, in terms of the ecology. The development has standoff buffers from the woodland. There's no trees to be removed. The hedgerow on site that members saw that needs to be removed is species poor, but that will be translocated to the boundary of Bow Lane. And then that hedgerow will also be enhanced along Bow Lane. Also, the restoration scheme obviously has the lakes with shallow margins and reed beds, as set out in the report into the restoration section. There you see all of that. It's gone through various iterations as well to maximise the ecology with the county ecologists and other consultees.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I'm grateful. The cumulative effect worries me. Are you effectively saying that the dust from the Bow Farm Cullymoors site right next door, just the other side of the M50, is going to stop at the M50? It's not going to carry on?
The assessments assessed dust and air quality impact and concluded it was acceptable. There'd be no combined impact cumulative effect. So that was assessed originally in terms of their environmental impact assessment. Then officers also requested a further Regulation 25 request to look at in more detail the impacts with Bow Farm, and that again is the same. There'd be no significant adverse effects as inclusion of that, and that's been then scrutinised by Worcestershire Regulatory Services, the technical consultee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I hear what you're saying, but I just cannot see that. I think when we walked round the CEMEX site, we could see just the dust rising from vehicles travelling, and I think the cumulative effect could well be incorrect. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Riaz?
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any local data, health data, in terms of impact on local residents in terms of increase in asthma rates or bronchitis or lung diseases, or in terms of other sites in and around there, in terms of just to assess and qualify that impact?
So the applicant, as you can see in the report under amenity, carried out a health impact assessment. That examined health impacts on local population, also had a dust and air quality assessment. Again, that looks at impacts on local receptors and that considered there'd be a slight adverse impact as the worst impact in terms of dust, which is acceptable in E&I and planning terms.
Councillor Turner?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Reiterating what my colleagues have already spoke about, it's the silica sand associated with river sand class 1 carcinogenic. Yeah. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, support links between silica and cancer deployment. Ripple Village lies directly in line with the prevailing wind direction. From what I saw and witnessed yesterday at the processing plant, with the dry conditions and the dust clearly being seen, with the movement of heavy good earth-moving vehicles, although we were told that a water bowser had watered early on that day, the ground was clearly dry. There are systems ranging from basic advanced mist fogging systems, all designed to minimize dust emissions. I'm all for investment, employment, and proposed development and economic rewards would bring. But these issues are inherent risk to neighbouring residents from silica has to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would remind you all that these are just questions to officers. We'll go into the debate later. Councillor Cleary?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. I can't remember the exact times, but there's a record in there of the opening times or the working times of this quarry, but I didn't see any working times for the sump pump, which I understand is going to need to be working to keep a dry excavation area. I don't know anything about sump pumps, but I imagine they've got to be kept on 24 hours a day. So can I have some clarification on that, please, because it's not listed in the working times.
That's a good question. I think I'd have to direct that to the applicant, so maybe we could direct that to them when they come and speak.
Councillor Allen?
I'll press the button. There we are. Get that right. Thank you. In the report, it mentions that I did request an economic assessment for the village. Has there one been done?
So the applicant looked at the Mineral Planning Authority encouraged the applicant to address Councillor Allen's comments, and you'll see there set out in the economic impact assessment the applicant's response. So that begins on page 114. And the applicant assessed whether one was required, and you'll see there one was not required because of the conclusions in the dust and air quality impact assessments and the distance from receptors such as the railway inn and also Perkrup Hall, which were referenced. So one was not done and one was not considered required for those reasons.
Right, okay, thank you. So we have no idea what's going to happen to the village and its economy. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Riaz?
Yeah, thank you. Who will be responsible for the compliance monitoring and reporting, particularly around noise, dust and the water table, and how will the data be publicly available, and how can it be independently verified?
So the county council has a planning monitoring enforcement officer who's here today. Unlike the district councils, the county council and operators have to pay for the pleasure for us to monitor their sites, so for landfills and quarry sites. So we monitor those sites and we get paid for doing so. In terms of the water environment, that would be monitored by those conditions that relate to that, and then the independent examination there would be the Environment Agency. Separately as well, they need abstraction licenses and a permit from the Environment Agency in relation to the water environment. In terms of noise and dust, that again is assessed by the Mineral Planning Authority, but you'll see like there's a noise monitoring scheme required, and that will be scrutinised and also shared with Worcestershire Regulatory Services. So it's a combination of the Mineral Planning Authority in consultation with technical consultees.
looks as though we're done with the questions. So we'll move on to public participation. And could I ask Nick Hartnett, an objector, to take a seat at the table and to address the committee? Just for noting, Mr Hartnett was originally unable to attend the meeting and missed the deadline for the submission of his presentation. However, he has requested that he was available and I have permitted him to speak. Please remember, Mr Hartnett, that you are allocated 3 minutes for your presentation, and at the conclusion of your presentation, if you're happy to do so, members may well have some questions. Over to you, Mr Hartnett.
Thank you, Chairman. 3 minutes, great. I think it's fair to say that our community has been pretty good in supporting aggregate demand supply over the last few years. There's 6, 7 sites around the village. And to be fair, the big dig of 2005, 2015, I supported. I could see the benefits to the wider community. Unfortunately, with this one, I think CEMEX have gone one step too far. There's a number of reasons why I'd like to object and get you to understand the reasons and the passion of the people in the village. 4 main reasons. Firstly, health reasons. Somebody raised the question of silica. Silica is the new asbestos. All the studies that have been done, the new studies that are evolving from GPs, from the medical practitioners, say silica, a huge cause of death where it is in vast quantities. Silicosis, lung cancer, COPD on the up. And your gentleman said there might be an adverse reaction. I'm sure there will. I think you need to understand that you're playing with people's lives here. And the reason that I'm objecting to this particular proposal is this site is too close to the villages. Health reasons, there's an aging population. They are going to be open to the dust particles, and it's scientifically proven that the closer you are to the population, the actual denser the particles are. They don't have time to dissipate. There's a, you're talking about people's lives here. The second reason that I think you shouldn't do it is the dust and dirt will be horrendous. Again, I don't think your representation gave true reflection of how close the houses are to this situation. And I think that the prevailing wind comes across from the M50 and will drive the dust and dirt directly into both the villages. I think that CEMEX will be good to their own staff in that they'll give them loads of protection equipment to actually do their jobs, but what will the villagers get? Not a lot, I don't think, from what I've heard. The third reason, and again I've heard it batted back already, is the aggregate of the Cullimore programme with this one makes this an actual mega project. The Cullimore programme is 10 years, and I don't know what the economic benefit is, but I know it was agreed by the county council not to do it, but then overturned by the council. This is one small project in CEMEX's portfolio. This is a $10 billion company, and we're talking about 400,000 tonnes of sand and gravel, close to where a lot of people live. And then the fourth reason why I think you should consider this is the noise and pollution. I don't think any of you have probably lived close to a gravel pit, but despite what they say about we try to make it quiet, it's not quiet. The machines are going non-stop. The beeping's going non-stop. There's traffic in and out. There'll be 50 people working at the site. It's a single road.
Sorry, Mr Hartnett, could you start to wrap up, please? You're over your 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So in summary, I think they're the reasons that I think you should say no. And I think you have the power in this room to actually listen to your community and put the community first for once. In the scale of things, this is a really small project. The risk-reward mechanism, I don't think is strong enough. And I would urge you all to say no. Thank you.
Thank you. You may now return to your seat in the public gallery. Second objector was Nikki. Oh, I do apologise. Still new to this. Before you, were there any questions for the previous? Would you like to come back? I apologise.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was told to go. But I did forget to switch it up, sorry. Yeah, I would love to answer questions.
Were there any questions for the speaker? Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. I appreciate it. have there been many mineral extraction sites around Ripple and Knockinghall over the last few years?
To my knowledge, there's about 6 or 7 around the periphery, and the village is starting to feel a bit like an archipelago.
Right, thank you. So it's endured an awful lot already, hasn't it? And
as I said, I think it has, and I think that the village has been pretty tolerant. And actually, the big dig, where you see the big conservation area, I think, on balance, that's been a positive for the village. But I think it's now coming too close to the village.
yeah, yes, thank you. So looking at the big dig, which is basically the two blue lakes that we see, now would you agree with me that they're quite a bit further away from the village, while this one is basically virtually in the village?
Correct. And I think one of the reasons that the villagers were okay with this is the wind goes kind of upwards, so along the river, or it goes to the right. I think this one takes it much closer to where the houses are, and the wind will take it directly into Ripple or Knockinghall. And as I said, from the pictures that were shown as part of the planning application, it was a bit disingenuous how close a lot of the houses are to that particular field.
Were there any further questions to the speaker? Right. Thank you again, Mr. Harknett. You can now return to your seat. And as you're doing that, our second objector was Nikki Reeves from the REACT Action Group, was invited to speak, but unfortunately was unable to attend the meeting today. So I'd now like to ask Mark Kelly, the UK Planning Manager for CEMEX, who is the agent acting on behalf of the applicant, to take a seat at the table and address the committee. Mr. Kelly is accompanied by Karen Hernshaw, agent, and Robert Marsden, the development manager for CEMEX. As there's more than one of you, you're allocated 6 minutes for your presentation, and at the conclusion, if you're happy to do so, members may well have some questions. Over to you, Mr. Kelly.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and fellow members. Yes, my name is Mark Kelly. I'm Head of Planning at CEMEX. Thank you for allowing me to address you today, and also thanks to those of you who attended the site visit yesterday in very hot conditions. I'm accompanied today with my colleagues, Rob Marsden, who is Development and Estates Manager for the project, and Miss Karen Hernshaw, our Consultant Planner, who both can assist in answering any technical questions you may have on the proposals. National planning policy is clear on the government's commitment to the building of a strong competitive economy, and that planning decisions should help create the conditions in which businesses can invest, expand and adapt. CEMEX's Rail Quarry is a key site that has been providing a range of markets and construction projects with a supply of critical building materials over several decades. In the context of the government's growth agenda and its plans for 1.5 million houses and new infrastructure, the importance of the site cannot be emphasised enough. Some of you may recall that I came and spoke with you at the committee 2.5 years ago when you permitted our Rail North proposals for mineral extraction, facilitating a rowing lake and a mosaic of nature conservation habitats. That project is fast coming to an end. So we are now seeking planning permission to continue our supply of critical construction materials into local markets via Rail Quarry by extracting sand and gravel from a satellite extension at Ripple East to the south. As with current and previous operations, we would limit impact on the local road network and associated carbon emissions by transporting the extracted mineral by barge north of the River Severn to the Rail Quarry for processing. We would make use of the existing agricultural track within Ripple East to transfer the extracted mineral to an in-situ wharf on the banks of the river that was used in connection with past workings. The 3 barges would transport a total of approximately 1,900 tonnes of aggregate daily to the processing plant, requiring 24 daily two-way barge movements. And that's equivalent to 190 daily two-way HGV movements being taken off the road. The agricultural access of Ball Lane will be used periodically only to bring mobile plant and fuel to and from the site. The proposed restoration makes full use of the in-situ restoration soils, so eliminating the need for a significant number of HGV movements on the local network to import restoration materials. Ryle Quarry has excellent links to the primary route network via the A38, and production output and associated HGV movements would continue as they are currently. Ripple East will be worked and restored over a short period of 3 years, and extraction would take place on a campaign basis to take account of river flooding. We have carefully considered statutory and local consultative responses and views before deciding on the most appropriate restoration solution. And in keeping with the lower Severn strategic corridor, this would be to a mosaic of land uses, including agriculture, woodland, open water, ponds, reed beds, lowland mixed deciduous woodland and lowland meadows. The overall aim is to strike a balance between reinstating high quality agricultural land, landscape enhancement, opportunities for habitat creation and increasing flood attenuation. There is potential for further community benefit through the incorporation of a community orchard and a new section of footpath to a link with the existing public rights-of-way network. Following restoration, CEMEX is committed to aftercare and management of the site for an extended period of 10 years for habitat creation within the non-agricultural areas. The proposals have been subject to environmental impact assessment and consultation. This comprehensive technical process has demonstrated that with appropriate mitigation measures, such as the use of soil storage bunds to provide visual screening, activities at the site could be undertaken without any significant adverse impact on local communities and the environment. Mineral plan authorities are required to plan for a steady and adequate supply of aggregates, and when determining plan applications, great weight is to be given to the benefits of mineral extraction, including to the economy. Ripple East will enable Ryle Quarry to continue to provide a steady and adequate contribution to the county's aggregate reserves. At the heart of national planning policy is the presumption in favour of sustainable development. We respectfully ask the committee members to therefore recognise the vital importance of Ripple East and to grant permission for this proposal, which will support the government's development delivery agenda and is in accordance with national planning policy and the adopted Worcestershire Minerals Local Plan. Madam Chairman, members, thank you. As I say, I have my two colleagues here who can take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your presentation. I'll now ask if members have any questions.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor.
And yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Council and residents. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for that presentation. If I can just ask two questions, if I may. So there was a point noted earlier with regards to the sump pumps and potential machinery working overnight. If you can just confirm what the working hours for those sump pumps will be, and is that something that would be continuous?
Good morning. The sump pumps would need to run continuously during the dewatering process. As was mentioned earlier, the site would be worked on a campaign basis, so the dewatering would take place during the campaigns and when it's necessary, when the water levels are such that that is required.
Thank you. And just a second question from me, if you don't mind. So obviously there's been some noting in the agenda papers and discussion today about the vehicles, obviously, that will be transporting materials. But I'm just curious, how many employees are you expecting to have at the site? Because obviously there will be employees, obviously, that will be travelling back and forth in the area as well. So I'm just curious if you know what that figure would be, roughly.
Yeah, about 3. Yeah, there'd be, yes.
Sorry, just to clarify, as in, is it just 3 people working at the site, or are there going to be other people working at the site that aren't using the machinery? I'm just thinking people driving to work back and forth that are going to be using the areas.
notwithstanding the
Yeah.
barge operation, you're clarifying, yeah, there's be 2 to 3 people on machinery, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cleary?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Evans, for following on with that about the sump pump. I've got a question about, you mentioned there's a potential for further community benefits relating to community orchard and footpaths to link to the local network. To me, that doesn't sound as though it should be a potential for a further community benefit. It should be definite. So can you tell me what the plans are for that and how firm are they? Because I think you probably need to keep the community on side. And I would suggest that community orchards and linking footpaths is imperative, not a potential. Thank you.
Thank you. I would agree. But not everybody has the same opinion. And we did get a lot of different views on the proposed restoration. And some actually queried the relevance of an orchard. I mean, the proposal for that was on the back of the fact that traditional orchards are a biodiversity, UK biodiversity action plan habitat, and obviously there's some sort of connection with the area in terms of fruit trees and so on. So, and in terms of footpath link, again, it's not something that CEMEX wants to impose on people, but is offering, hence the word potential. But in terms of footpath link, CEMEX would work with the Public Rights of Way team at Worcestershire County Council to submit the relevant planning application to make sure that link could be provided in due course.
Just thank you. It was the word offer that I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming to speak today. I do appreciate it. What are the working hours of the site, please?
Councillor Allen, I think it's in the committee report. It's also conditioned. Perhaps officers could help us. Okay.
So Mondays to Fridays, starting from 7:30 and finishing at 18:30. Saturdays would be 7:30 to midday, and no operations on Sundays, public or bank holidays. I mean, in practice, even during the week, sites tend to finish a bit earlier than that, but obviously there's a bit of clearing up to do and so on and so forth at the end of each day.
Yes, okay, thank you. Well, I thought it was important to make sure you knew what the operating hours were, even whatever was in the report. Now, as I understand it, because I not only voted but proposed the Royal North extension, that you pile up material on site, is that correct?
It would be stockpiled in the stockpile area by the barge loading facility, yeah.
Yeah, so you do stockpile it. And how do you limit dust coming off the top of it if it's a windy day?
Well, the material is generally going to be quite damp because of the location within the floodplain. And in the event that the entire stockpile is dried out, then there are methods to dampen the stockpiles down using a water bowser.
Okay, so you have somebody monitoring it, and when it needs to be sprayed, you spray it. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Is somebody going to do that on a Sunday or a bank holiday?
Well, yes, if the conditions are appropriate for us to do that, yes, there's a dust management plan which we have to comply with by condition.
My point is that you're only operating on Monday through to Friday and Saturday. So if it's a very hot day, such as yesterday, where we saw dust rising from your processing plant, if it's a windy day on a Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, there's not going to be anybody there to monitor it or take any actions, are there?
Well, we'll have to comply with the conditions within the dust management plan. So the whole process is regulated by the planning authority, so that will be taken into account.
Right. Well, I'm not aware that's taken into account at all at the moment, is it?
I'm sorry, Councillor Allen, where are you talking about? At the existing site?
No, this proposed site, I can't see where it says that somebody's going to take action on a Sunday afternoon if it's a hot, dry, windy day.
Dust conditions? Yeah. It will be within the dust management plan,
Right.
as conditioned by the planning authority.
Okay. All right. I think we're going around in circles, so I'll leave that. Have you entered into any sort of deal with Silvermead so they don't object to this application?
None whatsoever.
Right. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bennett? Thank you. Were there any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for giving your presentation today. The two properties that are close to this extraction site, would you consider offering the two properties if they was in agreement to have installed a positive air unit in their properties at your cost? This would obviously reduce any dust that the properties might ingress into the properties, and it would be nice for you to work with the residents to mitigate any adverse effects. And the second question would be your pump. If your pump, which is going to be running 24 hours a day, water extraction, if that was to create a problem, would you consider putting in an acoustic fence to reduce any noise and reflect noise from that pump if it was to become a problem? There's two questions.
Yeah, I mean, should we address what appears to be the sort of major concern that's been raised, which is around dust emissions today, and I think it's been put in the context of silica and silicosis. The HSE is very clear in terms of their reporting on silica. There are no cases of respiratory silicosis in the general population. It's related to very specific intense conditions in industrial settings, where people are cutting stone and things in enclosed spaces. There are no cases associated with sand and gravel workings. Our guys who work on site all the time, they don't have respiratory control, it's not required. There are no cases of poor health associated with what we work on site. So I think it's very clear that we need to put that. There has been a technical note provided by Stantec as part of the assessment work. In terms of the responses and mitigation that's required in terms of an application, we need to be very clear that is done at arm's length by technical experts. We then respond in terms of the mitigation, in terms of advice on that, as to what is deemed to be significant and what is appropriate. And in terms of what's then just been requested in terms of weather systems in houses or even relating to noise and acoustic fencing, all of those things are about the assessment work that's been undertaken to date, and we have obviously put forward proposals based around the advice from those technical experts. If subsequently there was some issue that arose at the site and we were able to look at a way of dealing with that, we will always work with our neighbours to try and do that. But there's certainly no base in talking about silicosis in the way that's been put forward today.
Sorry, can I just add on the noise issue? Worcestershire County Council have imposed a planning condition that would be attached to any permission requiring the applicant to monitor noise in accordance with the thresholds that are listed in the planning condition for the closest residential properties. So if there were an issue, it would be flagged during that process. But to date, all the assessments suggest that there would not be any significant adverse effects resulting from a noise.
Yeah, the question really is, there's going to be a CLG, as I read, in action, and the question really is, the two properties that are in the near location of the extraction site. Those two properties will obviously get far more dust in the house if the site is worked, or if it is not worked, the dust would be reduced. I'm not talking about silica dust. Maybe it can be dust off the tracks and movement of vehicles. And what I'm saying is, if there was a problem, would you consider working with the residents and installing a positive air system into the property at your own expense? Would that be something that you would consider if it was to become a problem?
Thank you for the question, clarifying. I mean, I think from our perspective, then, we've operated lots of sand and gravel sites over the years. We've done dust monitoring with sticky pads, water containers which trap dust around the site. We know generally that these type of workings give rise to very similar levels of dust from agricultural working. So bear in mind, we're not processing on this part of the site, that's going up the road. And so processing would give rise probably to more dust emission. But in terms of the proximity to the village and in terms of the proximity to nearest receptors for houses, then there's simply no evidence from our perspective that would give rise to dust greater than you'd expect to see from the existing agricultural workings. Certainly, if there were issues that arose and there were things we need to look at, we would always work with communities to do that. But I'm not going to give judgment on an issue which is put forward to say we'd provide some specific kind of amelioration, which at this stage is certainly not suggested that it's required.
It's answered but not answered, Chairman. Okay, we'll move on.
Yes?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. My question is, obviously, the public speaker at the start demonstrated that with historic sites that CMEX have in the area, there's been a good working relationship with the local communities, and the local residents have found it quite acceptable. And they've tolerated a lot of the work that CMEX and your company have done on site, and in terms of they've recognised the value that you've added to it. The addition of this site is clearly being seen as a step too far. Planning, in my opinion, is all about compromise in terms of this. An additional site on top of what you've already got, is there any consideration from your behalf in terms of that extra of going that step too far? Is there a compromise you can reach in terms of reducing your working week to, say, a 4-day working week, in terms of having that balance between the local residents' concerns and the needs of your business?
Thank you. I think it's important to say that, as we know, minerals can only be worked where they're found, and the geology isn't consistent across the UK. In this area, there are sand and gravel deposits that are obviously critical for construction. Planning authorities are also required to make provision for a steady and adequate supply of minerals for construction. There have been workings in the area in the past which are coming to an end, and it's important to stress that Ripple East would be a follow-on from the current workings at Ryle North, so they will be finished when Ripple East starts. This is a short-lived development, and there would be progressive restoration to make sure that the site is reinstated as quickly as possible. If the working doesn't take place, then potentially the mineral would be sterilised. There is infrastructure in place, namely the wharf, that can be used, and all measures have been taken by CMEX to make sure that impacts would be minimised.
follow on, Chair. I mean, the question hasn't been answered. The point I was trying to make is if does it require a 5-day operation in order for you to extract the minerals in that time? Could you do the same amount of work in 4 days, giving respite for an extra day to the local residents?
If I could answer that, I think it has a potential to prolong the project beyond the timescales. The way we've worked it out is to do it over 5 days, delivering those materials by barge. I don't think we'll be able to get extra barges in on over 4 days. So I think the consequence would be adding perhaps many more months to the life of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly and colleagues. You may now return to your seat in the public gallery. Oh, sorry. Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not actually sure if it's a question for CEMEX or it may be for the planning officer. But it was just, we've obviously just talked a lot about the dust, and in particular the dust to the two closest houses, which is Silvermead and something else. I can't remember the second one, sorry. But have we actually had complaints from these residents in the two closest houses? Because we've spent a lot of time talking about the residents there, and I didn't see a complaint from either of the two residents that lives closest. If someone could confirm that for me.
Yes, you're right. They haven't commented on the application.
Right. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, in regard to the dust that's been mentioned continuously all the way through this debate, I know there's mitigating circumstances to how all of this could be monitored and so on. Yesterday, when we visited the site, as I said earlier, a water bowser was supposed to have been used early in the morning to reduce the dust, knowing the sensitivity that dust is going to have, any form of dust, let alone silica dust. Why wasn't adequate, even on 1 day alone? You're trying to reassure us this will be contained and will not be a problem. You didn't contain the problem yesterday. Why wasn't that done?
I'm sorry, was that a question too? Is that okay? I wasn't at the site visit yesterday, so I can't you were, weren't you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have a condition for bowsing when it's dry. We'll do that periodically as required. There were some localised dust from vehicles going along the tracks. There were no plumes of dust going into the atmosphere, nothing leaving the boundaries of the site. So that's all about controlling dust reasonably. We wouldn't expect to see dust leaving the boundaries of the site. We'd bowser down as we need to. There was no need to do anything different from what we were doing yesterday to be compliant in terms of the planning conditions.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for the applicants? No? Thank you then if you'd like to return to your seats. So we move on to our local councillor, Councillor Martin Allen, who is with us today. And before I open the item for the committee debate, would you like to address the committee, Councillor?
Yes, I would, Chair. Thank you. And just for new members, this doesn't form part of the debate, so until the debate starts, I won't be putting forward a proposal. I may not put forward a proposal at all, of course, during the debate. I do have some concerns, however, about this application, but I will listen carefully to the debate before I make my mind up. Could I point out to the committee that I'm not against all mineral extraction. In fact, I propose the mineral extraction be extended in Royal North, the payback being we're going to have a substantial rowing lake, which is going to put Upton on the map for rowing. It already is as a festival town, but it needs more. It's the smallest town in Worcestershire. So where I can see there is a benefit to the local community, the concerns I have with mineral extraction have to be balanced against the benefits to the community, and I think that's important. There must be benefits for the community. Like many planning applications you will hear in the next few years, it's not unusual for the local inhabitants to seek to get an application rejected. The "not in my backyard" comes to mind, and if it was that simple, I would ignore their wishes. However, there is the main issue I have regarding health. Sand and gravel have a high content of quartz. Quartz is silica. Silica is invisible fine dust generated when quarrying sand and gravel. When silica particles are disturbed, they become airborne, carrying particles that can cause serious health hazards and are proven to cause lung cancer, silicosis, bronchitis, COPD, and other respiratory diseases. Extensive worldwide research confirms the highly dangerous nature of silicon and the resulting serious illness and death. You only have to Google it to find out. You can do your own research in a few seconds. Airborne silica can be taken directly into the lungs. Once in the lungs, there is no way of removing these particles. They are there inside the body for life. Many countries throughout the world agree that this is the case and warn that residents living near aggregate quarries and sand and gravel operations are exposed to risk. There is in fact no consensus about how low an acceptable risk level ought to be. Research has confirmed that the size can in no way deter the effect of silica once the ground is disturbed. Particular size cannot be controlled when the aggregate is broken. For example, once airborne, with a wind speed of just 3.1 miles per hour, you can see silica particles travel a distance of half a mile, while a wind speed of 12.2 miles an hour, which is not unusual in that area, can carry the silica particles 2.3 miles, totally covering the whole village. Ripple and Uckinall have a dominantly southwesterly prevailing wind. It does put these residents firmly in the path of these particular particulates. There is a mineral extraction plan which was approved in 2020 by this council. I personally believe it's totally insufficient to prevent harm to residents. It used to have a 200 metre exclusion zone on the old plan, and it would have stopped this plan dead in its tracks, and it would have protected the residents and the village of Ripple. Other European countries use a 1,000 metre extraction boundary to protect residents from the effects of mineral extraction. As you've seen, local residents live right next to the proposed site. On page 16, para 95, I did ask for an economy assessment. There isn't one. We have no idea the damage it's going to do to a touristy area. That's what Ripple is. You don't go there to do lots of shopping. There aren't any shops. You go there to the local pub for the walks, to enjoy the views of the Malvern, and to stay in holiday cottages. This is going to destroy that industry, I believe. On page 17, para 97, District Councillor Jeremy Owenson objected to the proposal, stating the land was Grade 1 agricultural land. Now, I accept he was incorrect, and in fact this is Grade 3A and 3B land, as identified on page 65. 3A falls into the category of the best and most versatile land. So out of the 11.3 hectares of land that are to be touched, 5.44 hectares is grade 3A, and I don't believe it can ever be returned to the same standard that it is now. We will lose that classification and that valuable land. On page 17, para 99, Ripple Parish Council states it's unfair to residents considering the 15 years of ongoing mineral extraction residents have already suffered and will in fact continue for at least another 10 years with the adjacent Bow Farm mineral extraction site. If you look at the plan where it says the site in the block of red, below it outlined is the whole of the Bow Farm Cullimores extraction that's going to take another 10 years. So they've had 15 years already. Surely there must be a point where we have to say is enough is enough. And I believe it does actually say that in the mineral extraction plan, that we can't just keep foistering things on one area. Personally, I do wonder if, along with the Bow Farm approved extraction site running at the same time, this is fair and reasonable. And I do wonder, would it be better for one to be completed first before the other commences? If they're going to both have to go ahead, would it be better to stagger them and reduce the dust? No, apparently the dust will stop at the M50 and not go any further than that. Is this a sensible way forward? And it's been mentioned that the two houses nearby have not objected. The last committee meeting for the Bow Farm extraction, you would have found virtually the whole village turned up to object to it, and they were devastated after years of fighting it to lose. And quite frankly, you've only got a handful of villagers here today because most of them have no longer any faith in their local councillors in Worcestershire to actually protect them and look after them. So I think you find the reason they haven't done anything, they've given up. They've just despaired and accepted they're just going to be railroaded into something they don't want. I will, of course, listen to the debate before I make up my mind. And I request the right to speak and sum up at the end of the debate before any vote is taken. Thank you.
Thank you. So on that note, I'd like to now open the general debate of the item and ask for requests to speak from committee members. Can you raise your hands quite clearly so that Beatrice spots you and we can keep it rolling along? Thank you. Councillor Alcott.
Chair, thank you. I note in the report there was a prior application which involved Gloucestershire County Council, similar ethics, and obviously they refused it, but obviously the applicant went straight to appeal and they were granted permission. So being very cynical, I suspect whatever we do on debate here today, we will either approve it and it will go ahead, or if we reject it, there will be an appeal and it will go ahead anyway. So I feel to a certain sense that our hands are tied. But I think having been to the site visit yesterday, obviously we're there for a little while, and after we first went to where the production is, we got back on the coach, I could clearly taste and smell the dust in the area. It was quite unpleasant. And I've just been looking at the Health and Safety Executive information on silica, and it shows, for an example, just a penny, and then next to the penny there's like a tiny blob, which is about as big as the one on the penny, and it's saying that's all you need to inhale for it to cause damage. And I think we know there haven't been proven cases, but to me this is a big concern and one that can't be ignored. Thank you. Sorry, more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, any other questions? Councillor Cleary.
A comment rather than a question, Chair. I've been listening to the talk about the dust and the silica and the sort of what ifs, but I don't know anything about silica. And I've read the report, and it does say that Public Health, the Public Health Officer, Worcester Regulatory Services, the Environment Agency don't have any objections to this in terms of these problems. Now, I don't know enough about silica to make a decision over and above these specialists. They haven't made an objection to this, and I think we're going down a rabbit hole talking about something that's, according to the experts, isn't worthy of an objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind you all that this is the opportunity when you can make comments. This is the debate, not questions. So don't feel that you've got to formulate it as a question. Thank you. Are there any other comments? I'll do Councillor Victory first, if I may. You can do the ending, the wrap up.
Thank you, Chair, and all of the members. I've been listening to all of the input, and there is a need for the construction material, and we only just have a sufficient land bank. Against that is balanced the almost predatory nature of the developments of the quarries, basically south of Upton, past Upton and south of Upton. The minerals can only be dug where they exist, and so to find other sites will be very difficult. In making our decision, we really have to take into account the maximum good for the maximum number of people. But even so, I think that the residents locally should at least be allowed a period without any interference before these further sites become online. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I think that the proximity of two houses that have not objected to the site, in the long term, they're going to have really rather pleasant nature reserve sort of site in their backyard. So looking longer term for them, I can understand perhaps why they haven't made any objection. I just wanted to explain my thoughts on it before we go to a vote. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm more
It's
than
all
happy
right.
for you to
It's-
go
it's
ahead,
you
but I know
being
you were
on the
happy to
corner.
wait to the end, so sorry. No, it was just a sort of question that's sort of come to mind following the comments raised by Councillor Victory with regards to the nature reserve. So obviously there's some plans in there for the 5 and 10 year period. Can somebody please explain, once that period is expired, is it going to be the county council that would be responsible for any sort of maintenance with regards to that area? Would it be a parish council? We can just sort of just give a bit of clarity as to what would happen after that period expires, just so we can ensure that that nature reserve, you know, sort of meets the needs of residents, really. Thank you.
So there's a statutory 5-year period of aftercare. So aftercare is the management of the landscaping and ecology features. And then after that period, you'll see there's a section 106 recommended. That's for a further 5 years of the non-agricultural lands. And then after that period, it then diverts back, should the Mineral Planning Authority sign it out of aftercare, so they're happy with the standard, that's when it would revert back to just normal planning. Landowner would control that, which is CEMEX.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I won't read out what I said earlier, but obviously it's all based around dust impact on the environment. And we know, we're talking with my colleague earlier about green belt, and now everything's being classed as grey belt. I'm strongly opposed to continued development on greenbelt land, and what it feels like at the moment, the needs of the government for building all of these houses is overriding residents in the local area. The residents, unfortunately, they're the ones paying the council tax, but they seem to be overridden by these other priorities. And I think it's about time we started to put the residents first rather than the other needs of developers. Thank you.
I would just say, as this is planning a regulatory committee, we just have to remember our training, and that has to be, if members want to do that, that's fine, but it's about rebalancing and basing it on planning policy and evidence. That's all I wanted to say there.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Read over this application in detail, and looking at it, we have an obligation with our mineral plan to identify sites. This site has been identified, and if you look at what could we possibly put down for a refusal on this site today, I can't think of a planning reason to refuse this application other than what is going to be created during the extraction, which is dust. So if we do anything, I think we can condition to certain conditions in the final agreement of if this was accepted today. If it was refused today and it went to the planning inspectorate, we as a county council would lose control over what we can do on this site. I think for the residents, we can't afford to be in the position of losing control, of local control to what is happening on the site. So taking that into regard, when you look at your final decision, and whatever it will be, it will be. But we must remember that we don't want to be in a situation which is worse than we've got now. When you look at these sites, and I've been on this committee for quite some years now, and when you go back to a site, there's one the other side of Hallow, which has been repurposed and put back into a site. And when you go back to look at the final sign-off for that site, it's clearly an advantage to the local area to what has actually been produced at the end of the day. We take it very seriously that we monitor these sites and we monitor the final sign-off of these sites to make sure that they reach the highest standard that could possibly be put on that land. And we've got some water sites in this county now, just outside Hallow, which is a wetland site, which is one of the wetland sites which is recognised in this country now. And I think we should look at the long-term view as well as the short-term view. So, and I do feel for the residents. I used to live opposite the lorry yard, so I'm well aware of dust and how it ingresses into the house. And that is why I mentioned that the two houses, if they requested or if that the developer would work with them and to not have an issue of, well, it should have been asked for at the time. The CLG will bring up items of concern over the time, but it will be, what are we conditioned to? So it's having the conditions at this point set out so we improve future problems and we don't sort of sweep them under the carpet. So I'll be interested to hear what the rest of the debate is and before we come to our final decision, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, I'm aware I've been keeping you waiting. Do you want to wait and sum up? There's a couple of councillors.
Yes, I'll sum up
Is
and
that
make
okay?
a proposal at the end. Thank you.
Councillor Rea.
Thank you, Chair. Fascinating debate as always in Planning Committee with varying opinions. I've also read this report in depth and considered, even though I wasn't at the meeting, the site meeting yesterday, and I kind of came up with a list of reasons for and against this application. So I'd like to just kind of go through those. I mean, I think the application presents a well-structured, time-limited and sustainable planned mineral extraction project, which is aligned with our minerals local plan. It uses barges to transport materials. It's notably progressive in reducing environmental and traffic impact. The restoration scheme provides a long-term environmental and community benefit through the biodiversity net gain, flood attenuation and public access enhancements. However, it isn't without significant drawbacks, in my opinion, particularly in loss of productive agricultural land, from proximity to sensitive residential and heritage assets, cumulative strain on Ripple and the surrounding communities already bearing the burden of multiple operations. To serve best the interest of this county, I think planning approval should be conditional if it is agreed today, and that strengthens, and part of that condition should be around strengthening the dust and noise monitoring, particularly in around Silica, enhanced engagement with local residents, increased restoration aftercare in duration, adjustments to reduce long-term noise reflection risks and traffic mitigation on Bow Lane. And I want to kind of pick up on some of the points in around economic development. If we all look back at a number of points I want to enter, if we all look back at the period of COVID and the amount of house building that kind of occurred in terms of personal extensions, etc., in and around that. It was absolutely, the country went into meltdown in terms of mineral supply, in terms of construction material supply, and we were looking desperately out to Europe in terms of trying to build that, to have that availability of resources in order for the country to start building again, and that meant naturally that the supply of materials was significantly reduced. The increase of costs that we all found, it went through a skyrocketed, and the country almost came to a standstill in terms of the needs. So the local mineral plan is exactly designed to minimize the impact of any sudden shocks in terms of that, and I take the officer's view in terms of actually land is only geological land for extraction of minerals is in Fewbris, right, and people are going to want to extract where the minerals are. The overall economic benefit that it will bring to the city and the county, not least in terms of reduction in in terms of local mineral supply to local buildings merchants, to local builders, to local things, that in terms of the cost saving and the net impact on the environment that will bring. Also in terms of obviously reduced cost in terms of that. Has to be taken into consideration in terms of when we're kind of determining this application. What I will say, however, in terms of CMEX's position, there's been a lot of compromise from the local residents. There's been a lot of compromise and tolerance, but none of that's reflected in the conversations that we've been having with the questions with them. Where's the compromise from CMEX? How will, it's about the balance that we need to keep with nature in terms of not draining our land supply and overworking our land. The same principles in farming that we do in terms of that, and then there's a balance in terms of being in tune with the communities that they're in with neighbours with. I don't see any compromise in this application from CMEX in terms of understanding the concerns of those local residents, and one of the conditions, as I've stated in the question, that I would like to prepare or propose is that a reduced working week that would enable some respite in terms of a balance between CMEX's working requirements of the site and the balance required to give the peace and assurance to local residents. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Sorry,
yes.
one final point, Madam Chairman. In terms of the actual, in terms of the need for construction materials and the point that CMEX raised in terms of the government's agenda of building 1.5 million houses, it is absolutely crucial that we have the supply to meet that demand. We all know in our local district councils how short we are of housing within the city. I lead a portfolio in Worcester as Deputy Leader in terms of we've got a shortage of housing, we've got 4,000 people on the waiting list. We desperately need builders, RSLs to build the housing, and the construction plans and the local mineral plans is one step that will help in terms of unlocking that potential in terms of getting the economy and the nation moving again in terms of meeting that supply for our districts. Thank you.
Councillor. Yeah, I was just looking for...
I'm going to get there. Okay, well, can I thank councillors? I've listened to your words carefully, and it's been an interesting debate. You may remember at the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned this, the mineral extraction plan. And this gives us the reasons why we can either approve something or we can turn it down. And there's no point turning anything down that's going to go to a planning inspector if we're just going to lose and incur costs. So there have to be reasons in this plan, which is what we have to work to, why we should either accept or reject this planning application. So in the Worcestershire Minerals Local Plan, para 2.142, there is an acknowledgement that the mineral development can result in impacts on health and well-being. It's quite clear, it says it there, there's no argument at all, it says that it can cause problems. This application, I feel, fails to achieve the objectives of the local mineral plan. It fails to test of MO4 to protect the health, well-being, safety, amenity of people and communities. And it clearly does that. It is so close to some of those houses, they could just lean over their hedge to sort of take part in the mineral extraction. Also, MO5 to protect and enhance the vitality of the local economy. There hasn't been an economic report. If you vote this through, you have no idea what it is going to do to the local economy. And without that report, how can you approve this? It's MO5, it says you've got to protect and enhance the vitality of the local economy. Also, policy MLP 35, best and most versatile agricultural land, contributing to the objectives of MO2, MO3 and MO5, which in my book, though I think online it's different, is page 207, by the report's own admission that this is grade 3A and 3B land, where grade 3A is classed as best and most versatile land. I don't believe that the restoration of this land will, in fact, bring it back into this category. Yes, it may look really nice afterwards, but this land isn't there to look really nice. As we saw on our visit, it was growing crops for people to eat. We have a huge problem in this country with being able to feed ourselves. We have to bring food across from all over the rest of the world to actually feed ourselves, and we're going to basically give up this growing land. In addition, the County Council do have a 7-year land supply. If they didn't, I could understand that our hands would be tied, but we have a 7-year land supply. And this addition is only, it's less than a year's production, a lot less than a year's production. Is it worth all that grief and distress and destruction of the local economy for just a few months? And it was mentioned that the nearby residents haven't put any objections. As I said earlier, after the Bow Farm application and the years of fighting that, many of the residents have simply given up. They don't feel that you are prepared to represent them or protect them. They've just despaired. Therefore, I propose that you reject this application. But finally, if you do decide you wish to allow it, I would ask that an additional condition be added to this site. So it cannot be worked until the adjacent Bow Farm Cullimores mineral extraction site is either abandoned and they don't proceed with it, or has been fully worked out. So you won't have both sites going at the same time. This ridiculous notion that the dust will stop at the M50 and won't carry on to Ripple, you're all intelligent people. You can work out the wind doesn't stop and everything suddenly just drops when we get to a road or a motorway. By doing this, I believe if they're staggered, at least it will minimise or reduce the amount of dust heading into Ripple. And it does make sense to limit the risk to residents by only having one site worked at a time. So my proposal is we formally reject it, but if not, I ask that my condition is added to any proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Just to provide some comment and commentary on the proposed condition, I would suggest, in my professional view, that condition would not pass the test of conditions. It's not necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, because we've heard earlier, they've assessed the impact in terms of noise and dust, and that's considered acceptable, as well as in terms of air quality and silica. They've assessed the cumulative impacts of this development and other developments in the area. Officers also requested further information on the impacts with Bow Farm. A further technical note was submitted, and again, that concludes it was acceptable. And that's been scrutinised again by Worcestershire Regulatory Services, who reiterated their comments that they had no objections. So I'd suggest that would not pass the test of conditions. And if members were minded to impose such a condition, it's very likely that that would be appealed by the applicant.
Councillor Alcott.
Thank you. I would like to second Councillor Allen's proposal.
Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see where the councillors are looking to go with this, and it is, you need to have a reason for refusal that would be acceptable. Now, the plan officers have worked through this and put a lot of time into this, and to go against the opinion of our professional body within our planning department, you'd have to have good reasons to do so. I don't feel that the reasons there are sound enough for a refusal to be heard by an inspector to refuse this application. I do believe that there should be some more conditions, and I would like to see a condition of a mister to be installed on the site for dry, dusty weather patterns, so we could damp down the actual atmosphere of the site. And if that could be conditioned, and I would look to our officers to see whether that could be conditioned. And if we can look at that, then I would propose approval for this application with conditions.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. Just, I don't know whether this is feasible, but before we take this vote on refusal or rather accept with the condition that the Bow Farm one is abandoned or finished first of all, we've just heard from our planning officer that says it's unlikely that would stand the test and would be appealed. Well, CEMEX are over there. Can we ask them their attitude on that before we take a vote on something that might end up getting kicked over by appeal? Is that okay?
If they're willing, I'm told yes. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just to answer that point, yes, we would appeal and we would also seek costs.
Just, sorry, as you come back, could you come back to the microphone? It was just, one of the earlier comments was about the mister, and I saw some body language. Could you confirm?
I believe that's already in the dust management plan, so it's already covered. Yeah.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, thank you. If I just come back, it's correct, we must have proper reasons to be able to turn something down, and that's why we have this. So if I was just saying we don't want it, you'd be right to ignore me. But there are reasons in here that we can take to a planning inspector, and I believe we can win. Because it's quite clear, the policy MLP 35, best and most versatile agricultural land, and whatever they say, we're going to lose some of it. That's in the plan. That's a good enough reason just on its own to turn this application down. It also protects, it fails again on MO4 to protect the health, well-being, safety and amenity of the community. Again, this is a reason here. I don't believe this application has demonstrated sufficiently enough how it's going to protect the local residents. They're too close. If you look at the two lakes, they were much further away. The locals accepted that. They accept there must be some mill extraction, but this is basically butting up to people's gardens. It is too close, and there is a reason here why you can turn it down if it goes to a planning appeal. I'm afraid those who haven't sat on this committee before or another planning committee, very often developers take things to appeal. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. But your interest here is deciding the right thing based on this plan, what's right for the country, what's right for the county, and also what's right for the residents. and they've had too much, and this is too close. So I urge you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'd just like to there's obviously lots of concerns about the proposal, and officers understand that. So I just wanted to, if possible, take you through the conditions, because it's really important to remember, if it went to appeal and the council were to lose the appeal, the conditions would be imposed by the planning inspectorate, so we'd lose that control. So I'll just take you through some of the conditions to maybe reassure you or highlight omissions, if that's in your mindset there. So if we turn to page 136, first of all, obviously the recommendation is for a 5-year aftercare period, plus a section 106 for a 10-year period for the restored areas of nature conservation. You can see there the time limits. So from this condition 3, so the time limits are for 3 years from commencement of the development. The whole development has to be restored. So it's relative, in mineral planning terms, that's very short term. The extraction boundary at condition 5, this limits the extraction boundary. So obviously the extraction is not up to those properties. There's a set standoff distance, and that's been assessed in the application in terms of noise, dust, air quality to what that boundary, that distance should be, and what's proposed is considered acceptable. Obviously there's no processing allowed on site, and that's condition 6. So it allows no processing or treatment of sand or gravel which will take place on site. And as we heard from the applicant, that is often the more dusty operations. Condition 7, waste acceptance. No waste materials or soil shall be imported to the site. So that limits the impact to the residents of Ripple and through Ripple with traffic. We've got the condition 8 for construction working hours. Turning on to traffic and highway safety. You'll see there that there's condition 24 for low loaders. So this is what we members observed on site when they drove down in the bus, the route the low loaders were taking. That's limited there till 9:30 till 3, Monday to Friday, to limit the impact. And again, there's also, as Ms O'Brien referenced, there's a construction environment management plan for highways at condition 25. So this requires the residents to be notified on the route, controls the route to the site. It requires a survey of the road. It also requires any mud to be removed from the road should it be deposited. There'd also be an escort vehicle associated with those low loaders. Again, condition 27, all sand and gravel extracted from the site should be transported by barge. This is quite unique in the county and I think fairly unique nationally. And that will limit the impact of vehicles. Again, condition 28, no mud or debris should be deposited on the public highway. If there is, then they have to comply with that, so they would have to resolve that. Dust, condition 31, there's 3 separate dust management plans there, or assessments. They have to comply with that. The measures are set out in the report, include dampening down, seeding of bunds. Those are some of the measures that includes. Misting. Then on to noise. Again, I heard some concern about there be bleeping from local residents. Well, that's not the case because condition 34 requires white noise reversing alarms. So those won't beep. Those are those white noise reversing alarms. And then condition 35, officers have imposed quite a detailed condition on noise level monitoring. And ultimately, if the noise levels are exceeded, and those are on conditions 36 and 37, and those comply with the national policy on the planning practice guidance, which we heard in your training has the same level of weight, same status as the MPPF, that requires them to cease works, all works, if it exceeds that noise level. And that gives members that reassurance there. Stockpiles again, so the sand and gravel stockpile by the wharf area would be limited to 7.5 metres. And this is the same as Ripple Quarry. Remember, this Ripple Quarry had a similar location because the wharf area is using the existing wharf, and that was limited to 7.5 metres, and the same at Ryle North, which was limited to 7.5 metres as well. You then have lighting at condition 42, requiring no lighting to be installed on the site. They have to use vehicle lighting and also the barge lighting. So that in itself would limit operating hours in the winter. You then have a flood evacuation plan at condition 46. in the event, condition 47 regarding drainage strategy, and then importantly, condition 49, a water monitoring scheme. So this conditions a water monitoring scheme that the Environment Agency are content with, and this protects the local water environment, in particular here, the sensitive receptors of the local wildlife site. Condition 52 has pollution control measures, and then finally, condition 57 has a local community liaison group requirement. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the points raised and put forward and the relevant questions. And they've been raised and good questions and good answers. My concern is particularly the increase in dust. May I remind the members of the Planning Committee there are only 3 people potentially going to work on this site. So the dust should not be that significant in my view. We visited the site visit yesterday, and I remind the committee as well that those who visited the site, it was the hottest day that we've had this year, and there was not that much dust contaminating the air in my view. We've heard regarding the dust that of the silica dust and the ill health contamination that is potentially forthcoming, and we've heard, I think, that we have no reports of that being a problem at this moment in time. I would like to therefore propose that we approve this application subject to the adherence of the plan as laid out by the officers and the conditions as stated in the plan. Thank you.
Councillor Rios?
Thank you, Chair. Can I see a clarification on the condition I saw in terms of the reduction in days on site, please?
Again, officers will say it wouldn't pass the test of conditions because it wouldn't be necessary to make the demo acceptable. And whether it's reasonable, it's the same operating hours as the former Ripple Quarry, which operated acceptably. You've heard from the applicant how that might have unintended consequences, where they might have to do further campaigns as it reduces the hours. So my advice would be to not do that, but if you want to hear from the applicant on that before you make a decision, then I encourage the applicant up through chairman if they're happy.
Yes. Would you mind coming back to the table to say whether you'd be prepared to reduce the hours?
I think
or days, I should say.
I think the proposition here is to reduce by 20% the working hours, and I can't see anywhere doing that other than extending the life of the quarry, because one of the, as Mr. Aldridge illustrated, this is a short-term dig. This would add 20% extra to the life of the quarry, and also cause huge disruption to our barge programme and campaigns. So I think it'd be very, very difficult. And as I said, Mr. Aldridge said, there's no justification through the assessment work to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Rios. Councillor Rios.
Sure. I suppose it begs the question then. It requires you as CMEX in order to make the maximum amount of profit available to work it for 5 days. So let me reframe the question. So it's about the extra day will give you the profit you need to make it viable.
There's nothing about profit. I don't think profit's a planning consideration here either, and again, wouldn't pass the test of reasonableness.
We have to remember it's a campaign basis. It's up to 4 times a year. Generally around 7 weeks per campaign. So the impact's not continuous in that duration, but it could have the impact of extending that. And as we've heard from Mr. Kelly, if it has potential to extend some of the life of the quarry, then some of these conditions wouldn't then be lawful. And this is EIA development, it hasn't been assessed. So potentially make an unlawful decision if members are going that route. So I'd encourage members not to pursue that, but if they were minded to, I think it would have to be reassessed in terms of an addendum to ensure it doesn't impact any of the assessments in that sense.
Thank you, Chair. All I was looking for was some compromise from CMEX. I completely understand what you've outlined, Steve, in terms of the amount of conditions that are already existent in there. I think they're pretty binding in terms of what we're trying to achieve. I was just trying to see, out of the goodness of their heart, whether they'd be able to see some compromise in terms of the tests and trials that the residents are going to be facing. I mean, if they're clearly not, then we can come to a decision.
Did anyone else wish to speak? Thank you for your tolerance. We just want to get things right and get the legal advice. So, Councillor Allen has proposed refusal. This has been seconded by Councillor Allcroft. And that has to be dealt with first. Are you still standing by that proposal? Yes, I am. Councillor Allcroft? So we then need reasons from you for that proposal.
Yes, thank you. I did give them, but I will give them again. I think it should be turned down. Due to the Worcestershire Minerals Local Plan Para 2.142, there is an acknowledgement that the mineral development can result in the impacts on health and well-being. I believe that this application fails to achieve the objectives of the local mineral plan. I know other people disagree, but it's a subjective thing. You have to make a decision based on what you've seen when you've been to site and when you've heard all the reports. It fails the test of MO4 to protect the health, well-being, safety, and amenity of the people and communities. Again, I believe that is quite a valid reason. Everything I'm using, by and large, is in this plan, and this is what we have to work to. Also, MO5 to protect and enhance the vitality of the local economy. We have no economic assessment. We don't know what it's going to do to the local economy. So how can we allow this to go ahead without knowing that information? Also, quite clearly, policy MLP 35, best and most versatile land, agricultural land, contributing to the objectives of MO2, MO3, MO5, by the report's omission that this is grade 3A and 3B land, and 3A is classed as the best and most versatile land. It's quite clearly, it's in here. I'm amazed to some extent this actually came to committee in some ways. I think, you know, if officers looked at it in a different way, they could have searched refusal. I would ask that we just go straight to the vote, Chair. Chair, I would ask that we would now go to the vote. I think we've heard from the officers quite lengthily why they should ignore this, but I think it's down to members now to make their own decision. And more importantly, we have a 7-year land supply. So I'd ask to
I respect that, Councillor, but also we have a fairly new committee, and I think we need to be aware of how, or if that's generally appreciated by you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just think before members make a final decision, I just want to pick up on some of the areas that might be concerned. It's all in the report. It's all been assessed. It is a large report, so I just want to highlight the relevant sections to members. So we obviously heard about loss of agricultural land, and indeed there will be a loss. So if you turn to paragraph 390, this is that the right one? Yeah, loss. This says Natural England confirmed that the proposed restoration of the site would result in the loss of approximately 1.47 hectares of grade 3A land. So that is best and most versatile land, as highlighted by Councillor Allen, and approximately 2.88 hectares of grade 3 land, which isn't best and most versatile. But that does give you a loss of 4.27 hectares of agricultural land in total. But the key paragraph is paragraph 395 on page 66. Here, Natural England, who are the relevant consultee, and these are the technical consultees for agricultural land, and they confirm that the proposal would not lead to long-term loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, or result in likely loss of agricultural land, and that Natural England assured that sufficient information has been provided by the applicant in terms of soil handling and the restoration methods have been adequately considered to the extent they consider that proposed restored agricultural land, where it is restored, obviously, because there will be the lakes, there will be that loss, would be a similar land classification to the prior extraction. So what I want to highlight there is the relevant consultee for the protection of agricultural land makes no objections to the proposal. Dust. We've had a lot of dust concerns about this application. So let's turn to that on residential amenity. So residential amenity starts on page 73, but I'm going to go and turn to paragraph 457 first of all. The application was accompanied by environmental statements. So this is an environmental impact assessment development. This has rigorous assessments submitted with it. These have been assessed by officers and consultees. And you'll see there's a noise assessment and associated addendums, and a dust and air quality assessment. You'll see then on page paragraph 459 what the operating hours are required in terms of noise levels for mineral operating. So that's setting out the guidance that's allowed. So that's 55 decibels in normal operating periods. And then you can see there over the page at paragraph 460, the noise assessment assumes a worst case scenario predicting the worst case in terms of its predictions and estimations at those properties, and those properties then are then listed. You can then see the mitigation outlined by the noise assessment there on at the top of page 77. And that is not exhaustive, that's just a summary of the mitigation. And then you see here the noise assessment based on a conservative worst case scenario with no screening in place. There will be screening in place, but it's assuming there isn't any for its conclusion. Concluded that the predicted noise levels from both temporary and routine operations would remain well within the limits of the government's guidance there, the planning practice guidance for minerals. You can then see it talks about the cumulative impacts of Bow Farm in terms of noise and dust and air quality. And again, it concludes that that is acceptable. And the conclusions of Bow Farm Quarry. So remember, this committee granted, or a former committee, the Planning and Regulatory Committee, granted Bow Farm Quarry, which is that site you can see to the south there of this application site. And we're obviously not considering that today. But in that application, it considered the cumulative impacts with Ripple East. So the County Planning Authority was so concerned with Bow Farm about the cumulative impacts, we requested that assessment be submitted then for that application. And obviously the committee considered then, based on that information, that that impact was acceptable. We're now obviously considering this application on its own merits, but that refers back to that Bow Farm Quarry assessment, and it confirms the conclusions remain valid. Obviously we had concerns earlier and suggestion about Bow Farm, and maybe this application could be worked after Bow Farm. But what happens if Bow Farm never comes forward? Can you see how that's not lawful? It's not reasonable. There's separate operators, and we're considering this application on its own merits. If we turn to dust, beginning on page 79, you can see there the paragraph 480 The Institute of Air Quality Management, the IAQM, that sets out the guidance there for minerals, and it suggests that the biggest impact is felt within 100 metres, and we do have properties within 100 metres, as you heard today. It also talks about particles of less than 10 microns, and part of that would be the silica that's referred to, and I'll come on to that shortly. But it does state there that sand and gravel deposits may possess an inherently high moisture content, and that's because their location in the floodplain. We've heard today that the water table is 1 to 3 metres deep, so the sand and gravel is damp because it's in the water table. And that can help particle adherence, so it sticks together, reducing the impact of dust. You then see at paragraph 481, there's been a dust and air quality assessment submitted. There's also been addendums submitted because council officers have requested further information, again, on cumulative impacts, but not only cumulative impacts, silica and silicosis, because of our concerns, and it's so important that that is addressed. You can see then the comprehensive package of mitigation measures on page 80, and again, that's not exhaustive. We've checked the dust management plan while members were debating, and it does include water sprays and a Bowser. You can then turn over the page there to page 81, and you can see at paragraph 488, the assessment concludes that with the application of the dust mitigation, residual dust soiling effects are not considered to be significant. Worcestershire Regulatory Services, on the paragraph below, are satisfied that the dust management plan appears comprehensive and robust, and its implementation should ensure that any associated dust emissions are prevented and minimised. Members have talked about a different site, Ryle House Farm Quarry. I've already raised the dust management issues with the monitoring enforcement officer, who will be investigating that further as well. So we have a dedicated monitoring enforcement officer who, we said earlier, is paid to monitor these sites. If we then turn on to paragraphs 491, you can see the health impact assessments considered, and then just turning to silica. So this is on paragraph 496, and there's also been a technical assessment in terms of silica that the applicant submitted, and this just raises that crystalline silica, also known as silica or quartz, is one of the most common materials on the planet, making up 59% of the Earth's crust. So silica will already persist on the application site. It will already be disturbed when the agricultural land, the soil, is disturbed there. It says, therefore, crystalline silica will be present on Ripley's quarry. However, the proposed sand and gravel extraction activities are not considered to represent a high risk due to the nature of the material, because it's got that high moisture content, and the processes required to extract the mineral. There's no cutting, so the absence of cutting or crushing, because there's no processing taking place, and you've seen the conditions that control that. So that's where crystalline silica is more likely to become an issue, and more consideration might be required. Therefore, it says the proposed activities are not considered to be high risk, and the controls in the dust management plan are considered acceptable. And as outlined earlier, there are no cases of silicosis have been documented among members of the general public, indicating environmental exposure to silica are not sufficiently high to cause occupational lung disease. So I appreciate and I'm aware of the concerns, but based on the evidence before me, I'm very concerned if members were to pursue that as a refusal reason. I think I've captured most of them, and I don't want to labour the points.
If I may, as part of the committee, this is exactly what the inspectorate would do for new members. They would go through all this in weighing up were it to go to appeal.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was asked to give reasons why we could turn this down, and I want to just reiterate that I have given valid reasons. They are in the minerals plan, that is our Bible. I've heard an awful lot from Stephen, thank you. It's obvious that the officers want to drive this through, and I'm left feeling that they want to drive it through regardless. And I'd say to members, you do have an opportunity. You don't have to follow their advice. Otherwise, if you're always going to follow their advice, there's no point us ever turning up. We might as well just leave it with them. I've given you reasons. It's too close, and I think, you know, you're here to make an informed decision, and I think you've had the information. You've had their weight of evidence, but there are other reasons, and there are reasons why you can turn it down and be confident in turning it down, and then asking the officers to fight the case if it does go to a planning inspector. Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. there are always two views of any decision that we take. Now, when I was reading through this, I was looking at what are the benefits that we're going to receive. Now, the ecology and biodiversity are the improvements of the surrounding trees and hedges and hedgerows that we're going to improve. That is going to most certainly have a benefit to the area. And when you look at what has been happening on this land for the past umpteen years, we've had tractors going up and down, ploughing, creating dust. Now, it's not, as it's been said, this dust is not only within the base soil, it's in the topsoil as well. So there are going to be more control on dust than ever before on this site. And when you think of it, those barges are, how many lorries are those barges taking off the road? And if we didn't have this extraction within this area, and geology said it was always going to be in that area, and that's we've had clay pits and sand pits around Worcestershire in many parts. There's I know where I live in Fernal Heath, the old clay pit that was there, the houses built in the early 1800s, all those bricks came out of those clay pits and was produced over at Norton Way. So things do change within where we live, and it changes because of the geology and what we've got. But when you consider the amount of lorries that would have to bring this tonnage into this area if we didn't have this mineral here to use, what would be the impact on the environment with the vehicle movements and the heavy goods on the roads? So it's, you look at it, and yes, nobody wants anything like this in their back garden. It is unfortunate. I didn't like when the bypass road was built from the motorway up to the Ombersley roundabout, and the benefits that that's brought. It hasn't brought many benefits to me with the noise, but we have to look at how we can get the best out of what we've got. And I believe that this site, the way it's going to be developed in a short period, relatively short period of time, and the benefits afterwards will be far greater than what we're going to experience with the detriment to the site, what it's going to happen. So as I said earlier, I do, and I don't know whether you've got me down as proposing it for approval or that. But I did mention approval earlier on, but I'm quite happy to second Roger and take it to the vote, Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to comment before Councillor Turner?
Yes, I'm assuming there are mineral deposits all the way along the River Severn because of the nature of the geology of the site. So will there ever come a time when potentially a similar development is proposed, that all the concerns have been put forward up until now, they'll be overridden because of the plans and the hurdles you have to get over in order for it to be refused? I'm sure Cemex and other companies are all doing the same thing, and it seems like at the moment we're just taking up bite-sized pieces to fulfill the requirements. Will there ever come a point when we'll have to say no, because it's Ripple and surrounding villages at the moment, but one day it'll be the village near you, and it'll only be fair. It should be, if you're going to say yes today, you'll need to say yes tomorrow. Thank you.
I can just provide comment. I think maybe in topical, but We've got no pre-application discussions for other sand and gravel sites, new sand and gravel sites in this area or in the county. We have one other pending planning application for Uckinghall Quarry. Yes, sand and gravel is abundant along the River Severn and also the River Avon. As members heard on site yesterday, in particular with the River Avon, it's very constrained with access. And here, this site before us would probably not normally be economically viable to a large company such as Cemex. Because they have the existing operating plant already at Rylehouse Farm, they're able to pick off satellite sites, making use of the barge movements, which otherwise might potentially be uneconomical and so not viable to extract. So here allows companies to extract those areas which might otherwise not come forward, and as you've heard, we've only just got slightly above the 7-year land bank.
Chair.
Councillor Ayers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the explanation, and I found it really, really obviously valuable. A lot of us do sit on planning committees in our local district level, but it's really interesting to find out the slightly different working practice up here at county. I did find it a little bit uncomfortable that certain members feel that those that are new to the committee aren't as knowledgeable or haven't got the experience in terms of that. So I would ask members to respect individual councillors' views in terms of that, and not prejudge in terms of that, and to impose their will on other members in terms of the decision-making process. Just in terms of point of order, I believe Councillor Miller's proposal came second. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I hope that wasn't raised to my comment to sort of give further information. It was simply to allow everyone to feel they were on an equal footing.
Yeah, absolutely. You were perfectly right, and thank you for doing that.
Right, I think we're ready for the vote. Would you like to read out what's... So we have a proposal for refusal.
Didn't Simon take the notes?
Yeah, that's why I'm waiting for it to be read out.
Chair, would it help if I read out the reasons for refusal again?
I think it might, please,
Yeah,
Councillor.
I thought it might be. Okay, so I'll try. I won't read it all out again. In the Worcestershire Minerals Local Plan, Para 2.142, the acknowledgement of an impact on health and well-being. I don't feel it meets this planning application makes that fails to meet that objective. It fails to test of MO4 to protect health, well-being, safety and amenity of people and communities, so you just need the number, the MO4. Also MO5 to protect and enhance the vitality of the local economy. With the absence of an economic report, it clearly, we don't know, we're just guessing. And policy MLP 35, best and most versatile land. And you've just heard from Stephen that there is an omission that some of this best and most versatile land is going to be left. So the objectives then are MO2, MO3, MO5, basically best and most versatile land, 3A, we're going to lose some, and we have a 7-year land supply. Is that enough, Chair, for us to now vote? I can repeat it if I need to. Thank you.
Right, and voting will be undertaken by the raising of the hand. Okay. So, as outlined by Councillor Allen and agreed by officers, we're looking for you to raise your hand if you're in favour of refusal, please. And those in favour of approval? Against the refusal. Forgive me, this is the terminology I've got to get used to. And that the result of that vote was 7 against and 5 for. We also had a motion for approval, so we now move to that motion. So all those in favour of approval, as set out in the report. And against? It's 5. So approval has it. Thank you all for your time.